when we're driving cross country and you're driving through the mountains, it's like, wow, this is beautiful. But you don't really appreciate the mountains until you're a few miles ahead of it and you look in your rearview mirror, sun setting, you're like, it's just that. Wow. Sometimes distance can create a certain amount of clarity. And so in the same way, separating myself from all of the, say, triggers to my conditioning, the place where I was, the people I was familiar with, the circumstances I was bound by, creating a big separation can be very helpful in the same way as looking in your rearview mirror and saying, wow, wait, I'm here. The mountains are there. It's beautiful, but now I have some separation. And so what it really caused, what I would say, it created an opportunity for me to realize what is actually my conditioning and then what is me. Separating the constructs I thought I was, the labels I gave myself, from the time you come out of the womb, they slap a name tag on you.
Madhu, I am so excited to have you on this episode. We are in for a treat because my listeners are usually hearing from folks in the corporate world giving very practical and insightful advice in how to manage people and oftentimes how to lead themselves. We haven't really touched on the spirituality aspect. Before we dive too deep into that, I do want to hear a little bit about your background and your experience being a monk and how that's translated into the business world for yourself.
Yeah, it's seemingly paradoxical. It's like sometimes we think spirituality is here and professionalism is here, and it's almost uncomfortable for the mind to try to marry the two. And so really what I'm keen to exploring based off of what I learned living as a monk with a shaven head in robes for half a decade, mostly in monasteries in India and then some around the world, is how do we, say, manage the mind? You're kind of talking about how the corporate space is managing people. We're going to talk about how to manage the mind and how to lead people. We're going to talk about how to lead the mind. Because until we become best friends with the mind, we become, well, let's say it could become the worst enemy. That's for sure. And so really what I'm keen to exploring here and really every day is how do I make the mind my friend? And what are those practical ways in which I can take my own nature, gifts, and psychology and utilize it to not only improve my quality of life and in terms of control my mind, but also use that in a mode of contribution, spiritual service.
I love that. And it makes me realize too, from what you're saying, that a lot of what we need to leverage and rely on for our management practices and our everyday life, it really starts with that thought and our mindset and how we're approaching whatever comes our way. So if we aren't right in the mind, then that's going to have a domino effect or have some kind of effect on what we're going about doing in our daily life and practice and how we're responding and treating others too, I would imagine.
Yeah, well said. And we always often make the point that our outer world is always reflecting our inner world. Whatever is happening in the mind is what's creating our perspective of reality outside of the mind. And therefore, whenever things aren't working in our favor externally, I'm a big fan of going internal. Say, okay, what's not working here? Because to the extent that, again, we could become in control of the mind, not in a way of force against its will, but more manage it. Like, hey, you scratch my back mind, I'll scratch yours, and find a type of compromise that works with the mind. From that place, then as if magically, everything in our outer world starts to move a little bit smoother, a little bit easier.
It sounds like you learned and studied all this as a monk, and through that experience, did you have a sort of default to that, or was that something that interested you prior to and prompted additional exploration? What brought you towards that understanding?
So you're telling me that 18-year-olds typically don't want to shave their head and become celibate? Yeah, I mean, suffering, that beautiful word, suffering, caused me to want to find any alternatives to the suffering I was experiencing around the world. Even though suffering is relative and everyone suffers, to whatever extent it is, everyone feels it. One can make the argument one suffering is worse than others, and it is true, but ultimately suffering is suffering. So you can have somebody who had a reasonable life. Like, I'm grateful to say it was reasonable. I mean, my parents were bill to bill. There was struggles there. Don't get me wrong, but I had parents and I had family. So whichever way you look at it, life was all right objectively. However, I was still suffering. What to speak of those who didn't, say, even have some of the facilities I had. It impelled me to say, what the hell else is there? Like, this sucks. You're telling me I just have to go get a degree in something I don't want to do something I don't want to do for the rest of my life, to live in a place I don't really want to live, and all of these confines that I was finding myself directed towards. And I was like, what else? What else is there? And I started reading ancient philosophy, theology, and sacred texts from the East, including when I was 16 years old, I read a book called the Bhagavad Gita. For those listeners unfamiliar, it's one of the oldest written literatures in the world. It's dated about 5,000 years ago. And it's all about the nature of the self, the nature of the world around us, divinity, of consciousness. Who am I? Who are you? What is our relationship, etc. And it started to break through my tiny thought processes that were there, or I should say my limited thought processes that were keeping me small. From the exploration of these ancient texts, I realized, there's a lot out there that I don't know. And there's far more out there that I don't know than what I currently do know. And from there, my exploration to keep learning and acquiring knowledge. And then eventually on my 18th birthday, after reading different literatures, meeting different people, going to different practices, meditation temples, whatever it was, I was like, let's try this on for size. I could either keep going to college I was going for occupational therapy at the time, which is great. Shout out to my occupational therapists out there. But I didn't want to do it. I was like, I don't want to keep doing it. Or I could shave my head, move to India, and learn how to actually control my mind, because boy, oh boy, was my mind controlling me. That's for sure.
I can already sense that calm and that confidence that you have just by talking to you. So I can only imagine what a great and perhaps maybe peaceful sense of relief when you transformed into that state. But tell us in your own words, not from my assumptions, what did that feel like for you when you eventually did make that transition from the state of suffering to finding that inner calm or peace or what you will?
Yeah, sometimes when you're driving through, let's say when we're driving cross country and you're driving through the mountains, it's like, wow, this is beautiful. But you don't really appreciate the mountains until you're a few miles ahead of it and you look in your rearview mirror, sun setting, you're like, it's just there. Wow. Sometimes distance can create a certain amount of clarity. And so in the same way, separating myself from all of the, say, triggers to my conditioning, the place where I was, the people I was familiar with, the circumstances I was bound by, creating a big separation can be very helpful in the same way as looking in your rearview mirror and saying, wow, wait, I'm here. The mountains are there. It's beautiful, but now I have some separation. And so what it really caused, what I would say, it created an opportunity for me to realize what is actually my conditioning and then what is me. Separating the constructs I thought I was, the labels I gave myself, from the time you come out of the womb, they slap a name tag on you. And forever, your name is just Schnicky. And you don't have a choice. You can't even hold your head up. You're just, okay, that's my name. And then you get older and it's like kind of cute. And it's like add another little name tag label, cute Schnicky. And then it's kind of chubby, cute Schnicky. Oh, he's cool, cute. And in this way, we just collect a Rolodex of labels, which conditions us, which colors our perspective of who we are. And it's very limiting to say I'm a this, that, or the other, because ultimately we know we're beyond the body, because the body changes. Every 7 years, every single cell in the body has changed. In other words, we have taken on new carne, reincarnated. Congratulations, anyone who's over 21 years old, you're at least 3 reincarnations deep. We're constantly changing at every second. And if somebody loses an arm, they're not less of a person because we have a body. We're not our body. We're not just a clump of cells. We have a body that we get to control. So who is that we? Is it the mind? It can't be, because I can change that too. I could see the mind's fluctuations and I can actually modify that. So rather, I know I'm not my body. I know I'm not my mind. I know I'm something divine. I'm beyond those. I have a mind. I have a body. And so from that is creating that gap, that space. You start to see, what are the limitations that I put upon myself? What are these false beliefs that have really contained me from understanding who I really am? And from that step, or from that separation, what that does is actually allows one to create a life that they want. And that's the main thing I'm grateful to have the opportunity of, let's say, at least exploring for my 5 years of living as a monk. And even after graduating the monastery, it's not like, okay, now I'm done, graduated. It's like, okay, I got my master's degree. Now I'm done, right? No, it's like, now you start. All right, now you got your degree. Now get in the world and actually apply this stuff. So it's a day-to-day process, don't get me wrong, but everyone has that opportunity to create space between what they think they are, what society or what books or what television have convinced them that they are, and understanding there's something so much greater than.
Madhu, it sounds like you have a very purpose-driven life because you have that awareness of self, and you've been able to shed some of the conditioning or all of the conditioning that, as you explained, and I can see that and I can feel that too, it gets piled onto us from birth. And that also makes me think about how we take that into the work environment too. And we will label people in our work environment. If we're leaders of a team, we'll label our team members. And that can be so limiting, not just for the self, but for others too. So before we can break free from some of the conditioning, what do we need to do for ourselves to lead ourselves away from our limitations?
Yeah. Step one is we got to get a good philosophy. We need axioms to move from. We need foundations. Just like you might have the most beautiful house in the world, but if you build it on sand from a beach, good luck. Maybe you get a couple days, maybe a couple weeks in that before it becomes a wreck. So step number one to building anything sustainable in life is having some foundation. And so when we talk about philosophy, really what that means is we have to have a good reason why. We have to have values that we agree to so that we can make decisions based off those values. Just like if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. Rather than having this free flow of life, like I'll just go wherever the wind blows. Like, sure, that in itself is a philosophy that says, okay, wherever the wind blows, wherever my mind takes me, I go. I'm personally not interested in wherever my mind takes me because I've seen the directions the wind blows me. And it's certainly not always conducive. It's random, if anything, and I'm not interested in living a random life. So we must connect with a group of values, aka a philosophy, that we can live our life by, and in turn actually have some pole star to track our compass to say, okay, I'm going east. Now I got to go more north. And the values that I would offer anyone, the ones that I feel very confident everyone listening to this already agrees to, but it's still important to make a conscious understanding of, or at least acknowledgement of, is service first and foremost. When we live our life from a mood of service, I'm here to give and contribute, as opposed to the alternative, which is I'm here to take, I'm here to consume. This is, I would say, step one to living. Maybe you call it purposeful, maybe you call it happy, maybe you call it content. There's different words, different vernacular we can give, but let's just say a whole life, a full life. Step number one is a life of service. And if you look at the people who are just trying to get more, just trying to consume, we look into our own hearts, our own minds, and say the times we're just, what can this person do for me? We're just setting ourselves up for sadness. We're creating expectations that may or may not happen. And even if they do, we're still not happy. And you don't believe me? No problem. Ask the people, you want money? Go ask billionaires. Does that money make them happy? They'll all say no. You want fill in the blank. Go find out if getting that's actually what's going to make you happy. No, becoming present and actually living that, say, quote unquote, purposeful life is what's going to lead to quote unquote happiness. And the way to do that is a service-based mindset. What that means is, how can I improve the quality of lives of others? Not how can others, what can you do for me? I deserve this. Deserve it or not, who cares? You're going to get what you're going to get. That's just how the world works. It's how karma works. You are going to get your just desserts. All things happening in your life are happening to you based off decisions you've made in this life or another. Everything that's happening is exactly happening for you. So rather than being so self-centered, which just causes suffering, we want to become focused on how do I improve the quality of lives of others. And in this way, we collect values, a philosophy of, okay, live a life of service. Okay, I live a nonviolent life. Okay, I live etc. And create a foundation from those values so that we can then understand the self, so that we can actually, again, be plugged into something that's going to provide us a deep satisfaction.
That's so beautifully said, and so important for leading not just yourself, but a team too. You're in service to others. You're not standing on a pedestal and pointing and dictating. I like to think of really great leadership as that servant leadership. So everything you're saying certainly resonates, at least for me. And I'm curious, if you were to help a leader develop that awareness for themselves and to develop that set of values, is that where the monk mindset method comes into play? Is that process or a system that you help guide someone to that awareness and approach so that they can develop that set of values for themselves?
Absolutely. Yeah. Even when I don't have a huge team, we've got about 9 employees, 10 employees now. And it's enough. It's enough people to manage, that's for sure. What to speak of, say, even some of my employees who have 100 or 1,000 or 1,600 employees. It's a lot to oversee, that's for sure. But if we break down our let's say, vision into its fundamental principles, which really is what we call the monk mindset. In other words, getting really crystal clear on what you want, how to get it in a sustainable fashion, and what's going to stop you from getting it, and how to stop stopping. And maybe I can break that down here in a minute, but that's really what we're talking about, is how to take what we absolutely know we want, not only our vision, but the vision of the whole team, and then break it into pieces that actually are attainable, and then slowly but surely integrating them and moving in a positive direction. No matter how big the team is, and even if you're just doing that for yourself, what's as big of a team of 2 or 5 or 10 or 100 or anyway, frankly, even thousands and thousands, it works. It works when we align our vision. And so step number 1 of the monk mindset is know what you want. Have a crystal clear idea. And when I say what you want, means not how you think you're going to get it. An example is, people might say, it's January now. Everyone made New Year's resolution, go, I want to work out this year. No, you don't. No one wants to work out. No one's like, you know what I'd like to go do? I'd like to really go and be in pain for an hour right now. Never have I had that thought. No one wants to work out. You want to look strong. You want to feel comfortable in your body. You want to look sexy, whatever it might be. The desire is not the habit. However, the habit is important, and that's the second step. But first step is, what do we actually want? I want money. No, you don't. What are you going to buy with that money? You want money just to sit in an account? No, you don't. You want money to get things. What do you want? What are those things? For financial security. No, you don't need financial security. There's no such thing. Sitting in a bank makes you financially secure. It's not true. What, you put it under your mattress? There's no such thing as why do you want the money? Why do you want to work out? Why do you want to do the habit that you think will get you happy? Figure that out first and foremost. And then we go to step number 2, which is, what are the behaviors I must commit to doing on a regular basis that will guarantee me getting what I want? And then we get into what we call values, aligning them. In other words, we have the what we want, how we're going to get it, why, why would we even want to do any of this in the first place? And then from there, it's just a following process of how to stop stopping. From once you know what needs to happen, and once you put it into a schedule, your current responsibilities and things that need to get done, how do we fit that into your life? And then how do we stop not doing that when we don't want it?
And I'm so glad you talk about that and make the distinction between the outcome, what we're actually looking for and hoping to achieve, and the path that takes to get there. Because, I think you're right. Most of us don't want to have to commit to that very disciplined habit. And yet it's the habit. James Clear talks about this in his book, very famous Atomic Habits book. It's that habit. It's the system that's going to get us there, not the wishing and the hoping and putting it on a mood board, as fun as that can be for anyone, right? It is building out that system. And I love how you have the values intertwined, because to what you said earlier, your point earlier, you have to understand the why. And if you don't understand why, then there's no purpose in what you're about to be doing or what you're going to need consistency in order to execute on.
Yeah, well said. I mean, and that's the whole idea. It's got to be both. Sometimes we just have big dreams, but then we never talk about implementation, or sometimes we just talk about implementation and there's no dream that's connected to, or at least the dream is so deep and kind of unconscious or subconscious that we don't know what it is. And therefore we're it just becomes burdens. Habits then become chores to do. Rather, it's wait, you're telling me if I go lift that heavy thing for an hour with a bunch of repetitions, I'm going to feel strong, look sexy, feel comfortable about it, whatever it might be. Okay, let me go do that. Now it makes sense for me to become the type of person who, quote unquote, works out, or whatever it might be. Both must be there. And then also coming back to the why factor, or the values of why do it anyway? Because the world can be kind of bleak. It's we're going to die. That's for sure. There's not a lot of guarantees, but one of those is that we have a limited amount of time on this earth. So it's what's the purpose? What can we do while we are on here for a day, a month, a year, a decade, a century, if you're lucky? How do we actually make it purposeful?
It's a really wonderful, positive approach. And I'm curious, a lot of us that are leaders and facing maybe constant change, and we're always facing change, right? But constant need for change management, which can produce a lot of stress. Maybe you're managing the stress of your team or anxiety. How do you use that mindset and that approach to create that calm and maintain that inner peace amidst all the potential chaos, or at least the ever-shifting ground below us?
Yeah, well, the first principle that I would look at here is around regulating the nervous system, because sometimes our minds will convince us that I need to be more calm, I just need to be less stressed. But stress has such a beautiful function in reality. And it just comes down to, how do I be calm when I need to be calm? And how do I be stressed when I want to be stressed? An example might be, if I'm walking down the street and someone does something inappropriate to my wife as we're walking, you can be damn sure I'm going to, voluntarily or not, step into my sympathetic nervous system response, my fight or flight. I'm going to get quote unquote stressed out and do what needs to be done to make sure that my wife's protected, or whatever the case might be. I mean, kind of as a dramatic example, but there's times to be stressed. There's times to be calm. Whereas when I'm laying in bed, I don't want to have those same kind of feelings. I can't sleep right now. There's times to be calm, times to be stressed. And so what I would say, step number one is learning the art of regulating our nervous system, which is predominantly in our control. Like, the body is so fascinating. I mean, just the breath itself, if we didn't look at anything else, the breath itself has practically full control. When I say practically, there's of course exceptions, but practically full control to regulating our nervous system, getting us to be in a particular physiological state of either calmness and presence, relaxation and safety and security, and or active and pressed. And you could say stressed, activated, whatever term we might want to give for that. And so learning the tools to regulate the nervous system is really like that foundational point. Because once you can do that, then it becomes a matter of how to identify when to pull which card. Okay, I'm pulling on the calm mechanisms now. I'm pulling on the stressed, or let's say activated mechanisms now of the body. I mean, even something simple like the breath, focusing on longer exhalations than when you want to calm down, focusing on longer or more pronounced inhalations when you're trying to become more focused and more attentive, etc. And so learning how to do that is the foundation for calm, stress, whatever it might be. And that puts one into a place where they, again, become in control of their mind, in control of their emotions, in control of their life. Because ultimately, your mind is what directs you. And so until you can say, hey, go this way, that way, anyway, we all know what the mind does. I don't have to convince anyone.
Well, it's so fascinating, and you surely don't have to convince me. And I'm sure our audience is finding something that resonates with them too. But it is so helpful and a great reminder for anyone listening that sometimes it really can be as simple as taking a breath, but taking that step further, to your point, it might be a different kind of breath that's needed depending on the situation. And to me, it sounds like what you're saying too, is we have to understand what's our priority for ourselves in the circumstance that we find ourselves in too. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it very eloquently. And ultimately, it's how do I show up presently to address the situation as consciously as I can? And otherwise, what happens is we're working off a default programming. Oh, person does this stimulation happens, I react this way. And as opposed to a conscious response. And to the extent that we can, again, control our nervous system, we're not going to be bound by the default conditioned programming that, okay, when X stimuli happens, well, I yelled because you did. No, it's like, no, you didn't have to yell. That was a choice. It might have been unconscious and might be programmed and trained, but it's still nonetheless a choice, something that we can work on. And so really it's the practice of becoming equipped to handle life from a conscious perspective instead of just going on autopilot. Otherwise, we suffer when we're on autopilot. It becomes so difficult.
That brings us back full circle to that understanding of suffering and being aware and having that intent in what we're doing. And so all of this is very helpful for controlling ourselves. But then what happens when we're met with other people who are out of control in their own bodies and minds? How do you encourage people to approach that with the same kind of understanding? Maybe it's in a work situation, for example, and a colleague is getting frustrated or acting out. How do you encourage people to approach a situation like that?
Yeah, a term I want to introduce here might be called the core self. There's different terms we can give. There's being centered, being cored, being aligned, being present, being conscious. The term, really, I would describe it as being in a place where you can consciously and deliberately respond to the situation, as opposed to just, again, being reactive. So that aligned place. And we all know when we're there. We all know when we're not there. Well, when we're not there in the moment, we might not be so present of it, of course, but retrospectively we go, oh, that was, yep, I saw red. And even if it's not that far off, I was in fear, I was in sadness, I was in whatever the case might be, outside of my core self. And so the way in which we, let's say, can interact with others so as to also improve their life and not let it degrade ours. Because that's really what we're talking about. If somebody does something that, even if it's not a problem, but it just rubs me the wrong way, like, how do I manage that? Step number one is we always need to step into that core self, into that conscious place where we are now in control of our mind. We are acting from a deliberate, conscientious opinion response, as opposed to, again, just reacting. Once we're from that space, then it's a matter of figuring out first and foremost what's actually happening. And I want to offer this beautiful perspective, and that is the things that are happening in our life are happening very much to us, not for us. And that means when other people say that thing that I don't like, we might give it meaning that it's objectively wrong. We might even know it's not objectively wrong. It just hurt my feelings. Like someone, I'd be walking down the street, someone just bumps into me and goes, "Watch it." And for a day, I'm like, I suck. I'm a bad person. You know what it is? I'm a really terrible, or like whatever negative thought pattern might then roll out from there. But rather, that person's just walking, and that person's just a direct person and just said, "Watch it." And they were done. And there was no ill intent, nothing malicious about it. But the belief I put around it, the meaning I put around it, could cause me suffering for days, for a lifetime. Oh, that one person when I was 10 told me, "Hey, could you keep it down a little bit?" And now I can't sing anymore because I'm like afraid I'm going to, like, there's so many of these meanings and beliefs we acquire from a young age into our adulthood. And if we can simply understand that it's just conditioning, and that actually there's a pure soul, there's a pure unit of consciousness in there, just like I'm a unit of consciousness that has a mind that has a body. And that mind and body, it's conditioned. It's body's conditioned to do certain things, mind's conditioned to do certain things. But beyond the mind and the body, there's something perfect and beautiful and brilliant. And that is that divine spark, that conscious, that soul, that spirit, whatever term we want to give it, the real you driving the mechanical body and mind. If we first accept that reality, wait a second, okay, this is a person who also has conditioning, just like I have conditioning. And it's rubbing. It's not rubbing smoothly. It's crunching up against. And first give them the credit. Okay, this is their conditioning. Look past the intent for just a moment and accept that this is a live entity that deserves ultimately my respect. And now I'm actually set up to deal with the situation at hand, to assess what is the intent behind it. How do I actually want to manage it? Is this even within my control? Because most of the time it is. There's very few situations where you can't do anything about it. And even if that is just communicating, I always like to say, I like to use my big boy words when I can. Like, "Hey, you just hurt my feelings. Would you mind not doing that?" Like just utilizing as much agency as we can. But again, it must come from that core place, number one. We must, number two, always try to extend ourselves in a way we want others to extend for us. AKA, okay, this person is a soul that's constantly just like bound by their conditioning. They're just responding to life and reacting just like I do. Let me just take a second. Let me chill out. Let me assume good intent. Even if it's not good intent, I'm still going to assume good intent. And then I can actually deal with the situation. Because even if it is malicious, even if it is a problem, even if it's going to be full of confrontation, you're now going to be set up for success. There's no version at that point where you're not still going to be solid, where you're not going to be secure, safe, and supported, whatever transaction happens from there or whatever interaction happens from them.
Well, you explain that so well and in a way that helps, I think, all of us realize that I'm thinking back to my grandmother when she would say, "Sticks and stones can break my bones, but words will never hurt me." And I thought, especially growing up, well, that's dumb because words can hurt you and they can be mean and they can sting. And to your point, yes, they could come off as such, but it sounds like if we are giving people the benefit of the doubt, we can move past those words. And while we might recognize that there is a better way of speaking to people, and that wasn't one of them, perhaps, we can approach it from a calmer, more peaceful place, recognizing that that person learned a bad habit in talking or in walking or in approaching people and communicating that we don't have to absorb and be conditioned by, if I'm hearing that right.
Oh, I mean, I love how you just said that. And, one term I often like to share is we want to hear past the hurt. Because if words hurt me, that's just the meaning I attribute to that. Because an example I always like to give, or even consider myself, especially when I hear something that I'm like, didn't like how that sounded. I always remind myself, if somebody in another language that I didn't speak came up and just cursed at me and just called me terrible names, etc., but it was in a language I didn't understand, I'd just be like, "What was that person?" And I would just keep going on. I'd be like, "I don't know what they were just saying, but I'm going to keep moving on." So why is it that then if that person says the same thing in our own language, it all of a sudden has all this meaning of who I am? Rather, what's happening is those words, if they hurt me, it's my own unresolved processing. There's areas of myself, of the childhood me that didn't receive the love, the nurturing, the safety, fill in the blank. Now this person is triggering a deep belief and meaning within me. So I might blame it. Oh, this person said that, but really there's a deep thing that I have unresolved that they're bringing to the surface. And I'm just transferring my hurt, my unresolved pain, my unresolved emotion unto them. I'm blaming them because ultimately all we ever do is transfer and project. We say, okay, I'm hurt. And let me give an example. You said the words, have a great day. If I said the words, have a great day, I would have been being a little sarcastic because I was snippy and being rude. Therefore, you're being snippy, rude, and sarcastic. Like it's projecting the way I would process, you process, which is just, it's not a good way to go through life. At least we want to consciously acknowledge we're doing that and stop it. Similarly with transfer, I have all these hard feelings about the way I was mistreated by my uncle. And therefore, but I'm going to take it out on you because I'm not dealing with this feelings of my uncle. But you've pissed me off. Now I'm going to take it out on you. And so once we become, again, conscious about what's going on, and that's why we got to be in our core self so we can say, wait a second, it's not this person. These person's words can't actually affect me. They're triggering something deep within me, and that's my issue, not theirs. There's nothing anyone could ever do, ultimately, that would minimize my control about working on myself or overcoming the sensitivities I have in life. And even if that means, wait, Madhu, you're saying even if somebody cusses me out on the street in a language I do understand? Yes, even if so. Because if you're comfortable with yourself, if you actually understand that you have intrinsic value, that you are perfect as is, you still need to work past your conditioning, but you, the real you, the consciousness within, beyond the conditioning is perfect, and therefore we're moving towards the deconditioned self, and we understand that there's intrinsic value there, that you're special, then no one could, who cares what anyone says? You'll be like, oh, if somebody says you suck, you're like, well, not exactly. It's a weird opinion. And in this way, we'll pass those meanings and ultimately take people's words, not just what they are, but hear past the hurt and try to understand their intention so that we can work on ourselves as well as give people the benefit of the doubt, just like we want people to give us.
It's that recognition that our value is not lessened by what they say, and their value isn't by how we received something. We're equally human and equally deserving of that respect. We could get into the nuances of situations where maybe people aren't being respectful, but how we are approaching that and how we're understanding, to your point, that other people might be hurting from their own conditioning. You used the word earlier, what they say is for them. And so it makes me think, well, they're speaking to relieve something, or because it's a default perhaps, or an automatic response that they have been conditioned to say, and it's for them, but it's not necessarily for us. So if it is, especially the example you gave of that momentary passing of a short, curt word or two, we can internalize that and make it something bigger than it was even intended for, because it was intended for that person to pass by and get their business done and move on, perhaps. And that's very, I'm trivializing it or maybe speaking vaguely when there is more nuance to it, I'm sure. But it makes me realize too that we're speaking for ourselves. We're not always considering how our words are being received.
Oh, well, yeah, you said it very beautifully. And one more point on that I'll say is that otherwise, without taking the direction of what you're mentioning, is one becomes very hypocritical. If I say, I don't like how someone's talking to me, but then I want somebody to accept me at my words. It's like we either have to be in a constant balance or not even. We're constantly walking on eggshells as to not say something that could potentially trigger someone. And we know people like this in our life, and what a tough existence that is. No one actually wants to live that way. So if we can either do that and then criticize other people for how they talk to us. Otherwise, if you want to be accepted for who you are with your communication style and just like authentically you, then that means you must also extend that to others and say, all right, some people are like, for instance, my wife, super aggressive, very confrontational person. She is just the cutest little Polish Italian lady, 5 foot tall, she is sassy as sassy can be. And she does not mince her words. And so for her, for instance, when somebody's too passive, too delicate, she's like, oh my God, get with it, like spit it out, right? Whereas some other friends are very passive. And then they're like, oh, my wife is like, well, that was very intense. It's wrong. The mind might start trying to convince, oh, I'm right there. It's not right or wrong. It's conditioning. And one conditioning is not better than another conditioning. To the extent that we say, okay, I want to be accepted for who I am, we must then accept others for who they are. And then, as you so well said, just start to look past the external thing that might or might not trigger us and go past it to really try to understand what's being said, and then still choose to communicate from a place of service, of compassion, of consideration, not using it as an excuse to the authentic me wants to say F you, but
Yeah.
not using that as an excuse, but rather as a sense of self-acceptance so that we can accept others as well.
That's great. And it's actually aligns with the conversation I had with an earlier guest about that understanding that one default or type of person is not better or less than another. We were talking about introverts and extroverts and how introverts can be conditioned to believe themselves as less than, or it's a negative trait, or could be seen as maybe not ideal for a leader to be an introvert, when it's not a this or that, either or, better versus less than, stronger or weaker. We all have our wonderful gifts and personalities and abilities, and we need to leverage that and recognize that in other people, because I would make the point and argue that we are all complementing each other. Your strengths are going to mitigate my weaknesses and vice versa. And that's how we can collaborate and grow together, whether it's friendships, whether it's teams working together, it's whole companies working as one unit. The complement of skills and ideas and backgrounds and voices all contribute. It doesn't detract from the individual because somebody is different.
Yeah, what's better, apples or oranges? Both pretty darn good. And that's the beauty, the variety. Imagine how bland and bleak the world would look if everyone was just same old cookie cutter. What a beautiful situation that we all have our unique natures and psychologies. And gotta love our introverts, gotta love our extroverts, our ambiverts, our other words we can find ending with the word vert. It's what makes life beautiful. And actually, beauty comes from variety. That which we appreciate in life always comes from variety. That's where, what do they say? I'm trying to think of this. Oh, variety is the spice of life. That's what I'm trying to say. And therefore, there's no good or bad. It just is. And to the extent that we accept that for ourselves, like, that's right. I have conditioning and just going to kind of try to work my way through it. And my conditioning isn't better than someone. Sometimes we think that way. Grass is always greener, but it's just not true. Their conditioning is theirs. Mine is mine. And ultimately, we live in a world that self-corrects. The law of, karma, which is a Sanskrit term. Literally, karma means action. In English, the word karma kind of means reaction, because with every action comes a reaction. But anyway, literal term is just action. And everything we do in this world is meant to help us become the best person possible. So that means if I get kicked in the shin, I might need to learn that kicking people in the shin is not an okay practice. If I get kicked in the shin, I'm going to learn probably never going to kick someone else in the shin. And the world is so beautifully designed that everyone gets exactly what they need, because life is happening for us, not to us.
Such a beautiful and inspiring message. Madhu, thank you so much for being our variety and the spice for this podcast series. It's been such a pleasure being able to talk with you, and I feel extra inspired and motivated just from this conversation. I know our audiences are going to get a lot of value out of this, and I encourage everyone to give some intentionality as we go about our day and take that internal thought like you've shared with us, so that we can live that very purposeful and peaceful life. Madhu, I want to make sure that people can connect with you beyond this too. So how can people find you online, work with you, get coaching, or find additional inspiration?
Well, we like to give all our thank you. And I'll just say first, Rebecca, it's such a gift speaking with you. And I'll speak on behalf of all of your listeners that it's such a labor of love to create something so wonderful like this and keep it going. So, thank you from myself and everyone listening for you creating a space for these conversations to be had. Really, really thank you. We like to give everything away from free. And we give all of our courses, all of our information, all our templates, all our resources, all our meditations. We give everything away for free for anyone who wants to learn. And one of the best ways to find it is in our podcast, which is called the Conscious Success Podcast. You can find it on any streaming platform there. And if you find it there, you also see we have a group, which is called the Conscious Success Community. And that's where we give all our courses, everything from holistic health to meditation and mindfulness to growing a conscious business, like pretty much all our resources. We're a big believer. I was telling you about service and generosity before, so as to try not to be hypocritical, we like to just give and serve. And, our marketing agency, I'm grateful to say we help with implementation, but our whole thing is just anyone who wants and needs a little bit of a help, a guide, an assistance, someone to hold their hand. You can check out our Conscious Success podcast, join the community, and have fun. Go through all of our content. And the only thing we ever ask in exchange is that if you use it to improve your quality of life, just please help even just one person by improving theirs. That's the only thing we ask in exchange for consuming all the material.
Well, thank you for that generosity. I know that you are helping so many people. I hope that all of our audience connect with you and take more than advantage, but take to heart all the great resources that you've shared and go forth and spread that for everybody else to benefit. So thank you so much for joining me. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thank you for tuning in and listening, and we will catch you on the next episode.